It's been a long 13 days for Education Minister Hekia Parata, forced to make a U-turn on the controversial policy of increasing class sizes. In the back down, the minister admitted she got it wrong.
I'm the minister and the buck stops with me. I'm accountable for these decisions, and therefore I've made this decision because it is really clear to me that parents and teachers are not happy.
But was it ever a policy idea that any minister could have sold? And what now for Hekia Parata? Well, political reporter Michael Parkin joins us now. Michael, is this smart damage control or a complete embarrassment?
It's inevitable damage control, and it is a complete embarrassment. You've gone from Hekia Parata on Tuesday night saying that the back down on this was not on the table to what we saw yesterday, and that's a complete capitulation on the government's part.
So was it the policy that was too hard to sell, or was it that the government so clearly hadn't done its homework?
The policy was too hard to sell. The $9.6 billion that's spent on education. You know, Hekia Parata told us about that time and time again, and yet she pursued a policy that was going to save $43 million a year. So it wasn't worthwhile.
There are calls now by some, the Greens leading the calls for the minister to step down. Do you think they're going to fall on deaf ears?
Yes, absolutely. She won't be stood down on this occasion because there was more than just Hekia Parata involved in the decision-making around this. At any point in time, the likes of Stephen Joyce, Bill English, the Prime Minister could have stepped in and said, look, what's wrong with this policy? What are the problems that this is going to throw up? And backed away from it. None of them stepped in. They've all hung her out to dry now, but it's not enough to step her down. Of course, if we see another problem like this and another back down, then it's a completely different story. But I think at the moment she's safe. She's a unique quantity within the National Party. She is a high achiever and they do have big aspirations for her. So at the moment she'll be safe.
And people may respect her honesty in this situation. You say the big guns of the party didn't step in, but privately they were in the meeting yesterday, plus Jerry Brownlee. It was Stephen Joyce, Jerry, Bill English, John Key. Do you think this would have been, I mean, we don't know, a case of them sitting around with Hekia or over the phone or whatever and saying, you know, we really think right now you have a decision you have to make and there's only one decision you can make? Or do you think she front-footed it with the big guns?
I think it was probably a combination of both. You will have seen those guys look at those polls over the weekend. They'd seen a dip in our poll. They'd seen 79% of people opposed to these changes. John Key pays attention to polls. There's no doubt about that. He would have seen the damage this is doing to him. The other guys around him would have accepted damage to John Key is damage to National, and it simply went too far. Now, they may have given Hekia a bit of rope here to say, look, come to the table and see if you're prepared to back down on your own will. But if she hadn't have, I imagine they would have stepped in around this because it's for the greater good of the party. And the beauty of it now is that they can, to a certain extent, sit back and say, look, we listened, we did what you wanted, and we backed down. But it is embarrassing, and it can't be sugar-coated any other way.
The critics will, of course, look at it and say, again, your commitment to a difficult policy was paper-thin.
Paper-thin, that's dead right, and this is the same way they can keep hammering this government. We saw it with the mining. What they truly believe in, they will only back down on if there's a public backlash. Now, maybe that's the way a democracy is supposed to work, but it doesn't say a lot about the values and the beliefs that this group of people have and their preparedness to stick to them. The asset sales is a bit different in that they did go to the polls with it. They did give us plenty of notice about it, and essentially New Zealanders voted for it, but this is a very, very different situation.
Let's think about what the big boys will be thinking who were in that meeting, and that will be, are we going to bounce back from this as far as the polls go? What's the feeling in Wellington?
Well, they must hope so now. Of course, we'll have another range of polls and commentary leading into this weekend, so they're going to be skewed now by the fact that they won't have taken into account this back down. So we will see a bit of a dip over the weekend. I think that's fair to say, but they must believe they can bounce back from this. The bigger problem now is how they fill this $114 million hole in the budget. I mean, these guys were only looking at a surplus of $190 million, which has effectively all been wiped out. So it creates some really serious problems in terms of the books, and it really means Hekia Parata has to go back to the education sector now and say, you owe me this money. Of course, they could turn around and go, well, we beat you once, we can beat you again, and we're not giving you a red cent. So the battle is still going to be there.
Well, we shall ask Hekia Parata very shortly about where she hopes to find this $114 million. Michael Parkin from our political gallery, thanks very much for joining us.